Our next speaker is Duncan McFarlane, Professor of Industrial Information Engineering at Cambridge University. Professor McFarlane is also the head of the Distributed Information and Automation Laboratory within the Institute for Manufacturing at Cambridge. His work involves the development of manufacturing automation and control systems, and more broadly, the use of digital systems across the industrial supply chain. Please join me in welcoming Professor McFarlane for his presentation, The Link Between Low-Cost Digitisation in Small to Medium Enterprise Manufacturing and Improving Sustainability.
Thank you very much, Josh, and also Liam for giving a great starter for this talk, I think. So I'm going to talk just very briefly this morning about the work that we've been doing in Cambridge and more recently here in Western Australia on looking at very low-cost digitisation. And I'm going to particularly focus at the end of it on how we're using this work in digitisation to address a lot of sustainability issues. I'll give you a brief introduction, then I'm just going to mention the pilot program we're doing here in Western Australia and finish on sustainability. This program came about 6 odd years ago when I was talking to a lot of small companies in the UK, and actually I happened to be out in Melbourne, and you probably noticed I don't have exactly an English accent. So I was out in Melbourne on a sabbatical and talking to small companies there, and the world was awash with digitisation in manufacturing, and many of the small companies I talked to said, that's not for us. It doesn't make any sense. It looks very expensive and complicated. And these are some of the quotes that organisations were making at that time. It was too complicated. They didn't have enough skills. The investment requirement was enormous and just generally inaccessible. So these issues of expense, overfitting, like the technology was doing more than any company actually wanted, and too complex, led us to think very hard about the type of program that might actually benefit. And so we came up with this program called Digital Manufacturing on a Shoestring. And for those of you that aren't as old as me, back in the 80s when I was travelling around in Europe, I had this book called, A Shoestring Guide to Europe, and it allowed you to, find the cheapest youth hostel or get a free meal at a railway station or something. So I used this idea to drive this program called Shoestring. And it's essentially what we developed is a process that took some of the technologies that are in our everyday life, like Wi-Fi cameras, or perhaps some of the voice recognition stuff you're using on your phone, or these little cheap mini computers called Raspberry Pis, and tried to use that to build low-cost solutions for small manufacturers. And the sort of solutions we came up with, and I'll give you some examples in a second, but they were really focused on coming up with an incredibly low-cost, foot in the door approach, where the equipment might only cost £300, $600, and most importantly, the solutions were really simple to deploy, and they could be just implemented standalone without having to get into the gubbins behind equipment, etc., and therefore very low risk. And the sort of organisations we were talking to about these types of solutions were people that said, oh God, I really want to do this, I just haven't got any time at the moment, or we don't think we've got the skills. And actually I disagree, but they thought they didn't have the skills, or we can't afford to do digital stuff. So we came up with this suite of approaches based around those needs, and we've been focusing really very heavily on helping organisations in their operations to improve efficiency, be more productive, and equally picking up Liam's point, being more sustainable in the way they operate. And there's a side benefit, and for those companies that said we haven't got the skills, we don't know where to go, it's actually starting the digitalisation skill development process, which has really proven to be almost as important as the solutions we've developed. So this process we developed began with a lot of conversations with companies and lots of small companies. We ran workshops. We actually got into industry events and said, can we run a 40-minute workshop? We won't take up any time. But we helped organisations to look at a whole lot of possible digital solutions and how they met or could help to meet some of their business priorities or the barriers to growth. So the first stage of our process is what we call a selection or prioritisation process, which helps you identify the type of solutions that might just be useful. Second part was to then work with organisations. We developed a process which allows people not to have to write a techie spec for what they needed, but in words, the operational people that would use the technology, and these might be simple bits of technology, would just say in words, I need a system that helps me find where things are on the shop floor on an hourly basis. And then we developed a design process, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. And then finally, a simple way of building and building and implementing solutions. And really importantly, that process involved the company that was going to be using the solution as well. So it wasn't, here's your black box solution, go to it. You're involved in the process of deployment. So that's the process. And as I said, and of course there's a review process at the end of that activity. Just to give you a sense of the type of solutions we've been working with, they're really simple solutions. This is a really funny one. Lots of organisations have got display panels that someone has to go and read every hour. And actually it's too hard to get in behind them, try to extract a digital signal. So what we did is just point a camera, did some image processing and developed a digital signal from the image processing of looking at that display panel. Job tracking, finding your stuff in the factory, or equipment monitoring. And some of that actually leads into the sustainability issue. And in fact, what we found when we talked to 300 to 400 companies is that actually their immediate digital needs were incredibly similar. And this list of the top 10 solution areas that people said we'd love to have a solution for, if I then picked out the top 5, 86% of companies said we would like to have one of those top 5. And around 95% said one of the top 10 is our priority digital need. So that was really encouraging for us and headed us into a systematic process. And that systematic process was around finding a way in which we can get all those low-cost, cheap components, systematically embed them into a design procedure that we constructed things called building blocks. And those building blocks are just, if you like, a wrapper you put around a piece of cheap technology that allows it to be plugged into other bits of technology. So really simple, like a jigsaw. And one of the things that came out of that is these building blocks we developed, like a cheap computer or a camera, they combined together on a regular basis. And so we were able to identify about a dozen collections of building blocks. We call these things service modules, and we reuse them over and over again in building our solutions. So our solution approach is actually very modular and allows us to build a new solution really quite easily using some of the things we already used before. In the program that we ran, it was a research project to begin with. We actually I think we broke all records for industrial deployments in a research project, because in that research project, we actually deployed 20 solutions in companies around the UK. And you just get a sense of them, and a number of them are repeats of the same class of solution. But that process, the one point to pick up there is you can see that I've picked them out in regions. And for us, what we started to find was regional approach to shoestring solutions was really important, because it helped to find the right type of organisation that could help support the deployment, because we can't, in the UK, there's about 200,000 small or medium-sized manufacturers. In Australia, there's somewhere, I think, in the order of 40 to 50,000. And what we found is that's too much. You need to break it up into small regions. So just to give you a sense of some of those industrial deployments, one is a temperature monitoring system that we developed with a Midlands company that made dental wax, and the temperature of their dental wax was really critical to whether, when you turn up at the dentist and you crunch down on the wax, whether it shapes around your teeth or not. So we deployed it with them, and these examples I'm showing you occurred in lockdown, so we actually couldn't go to the company, so we would send bits of equipment to them, and actually they did the deployments. So it's quite a revolutionary idea, rather than someone comes and does it all for us, and then when it doesn't work, we don't know what's going on. People in the organisation were doing the developments, and actually, if something was going wrong, they'd ring us, but actually they owned the solution by the end of it. And in fact, they went on to add a second solution. And the quote you see there from the operations director kind of gives it all. It gave them a start, a toe in the door on digital systems, and they've just gone gangbusters ever since. Equally, this other example, I've mentioned the issue of finding things. Well, this company deployed our job tracking system, and actually the operations director, who was at home at times during the lockdown, he did it in his spare time working on the phone with one of my colleagues. So we went there once to help with the final deployment, but they actually deployed this system that helped them find stuff on their shop floor. They made timber door frames, and they actually had lots of scattered orders for customers that they couldn't find regularly. So what are we doing in Western Australia through Kim Antonio and Andrew Duff and the team here that have been really very supportive in getting the program started is a kind of, as it says there, a learning by doing. So what we've been working on is setting up an ecosystem, a cluster of activities in Western Australia, and we've been focusing very much on food and beverage, which is obviously very pertinent to today's discussion. And we've run a number of workshops, a general workshop to introduce 20 businesses to shoestring, but then a series of proof of concept workshops with a number of companies and actually for some reason they all have something to do with B, whether they're bananas or beverages or they're in Bunbury, so I don't know why that theme emerged. And we're moving on to do a broader second stage of our pilot, and had a lot of discussions yesterday in the wine industry down in Margaret River. So just to give you a sense what came out of the workshops we've been doing, at the top left gives you the digital solutions identified by the participants in those 5 company workshops, and actually, there's a really good alignment with the type of solutions we've been finding in the UK, in New Zealand, in other parts of Europe, and we're going on in the next months to deploy the first series of shoestring pilots within the companies. We had a great meeting here yesterday with the pilot companies, who are a fantastic group. And what's really interesting is looking at the not that just their interaction with us and DPER, but actually with each other. And I think it's really supporting a self-help environment that actually is one of our great hopes, is that shoestring becomes a community-based approach to digitisation. So, sustainability. Sustainability, from our perspective, has always been in the shoestring process. It's one of the issues we looked at in terms of priorities for the business and barriers and problems and challenges. What we've done in the recent months is to ratchet up the importance of sustainability. And we ran our first dedicated shoestring workshop for sustainability earlier this month. Are we still in February? Yes, we are. So it was earlier this month. And what we did in that process is built a catalogue of solution areas that are explicitly meeting sustainability needs. And we've identified that for reducing resource use is actually probably the simplest way to address sustainability and make impact sustainability-wise. And one of the resources could be material resources or energy resources. And if you use less energy, you get fewer emissions generally. So what we've used is some tools from what's called the lean manufacturing area, and that's been a way of addressing waste in manufacturing. It's a process that's been used for probably 50 years now, but we're adding a digital flavour to that. And we've particularly been looking at these areas, these waste areas that you see listed here, and use those waste areas to identify categories of digital solution areas that meet the six categories you see there. So energy, either a transportation energy or energy usage in production, material usage, whether it's material usage, raw materials or secondary materials, and then material energy production. So over processing and over production is just pure waste. and of course defects and material waste are a big issue as well. So defects is kind of a discrete component phrase, but food waste is a massive issue as well, and then carbon emissions. So we ran this workshop and we got organisations to identify under those 6 categories where might a simple digital solution that be added to their operation that would help them address one or more of these issues. And the results from that first workshop are these. So what you see there is that process monitoring. No, it's not. Which could be temperature monitoring, moisture, humidity monitoring, etc. was a dominant theme. But there's a whole raft of other shoestring priorities that came out of that process. So that was the first of a number of workshops we're planning, and we may well hold one here that looks at the same sort of issues. And it's interesting because all those areas that are seen as being the green ones are the priority items, all of those were always on the lists when we ran our broader workshops, but fewer of them came up as priority items previously. So where we're going with that, and this is kind of the last slide, is we've had the workshop. We're actually, while I've been in Australia in the last week, we've been working with the companies that came to that workshop. We've identified a number of pilots that we're going to be launching in the near future in the UK, and the pilots are being selected based on the impact of the solution and actually the ease of implementation. So that's kind of the 2 decision points we make. So that really wraps it up. The message I've tried to make is that shoestring solutions are simple and easy and low-cost solutions that should be the opportunity for organisations to get their toe in the door in digital systems. It's going really well here in Western Australia, and I'm really thanks to Liam and the whole DPIRD team for supporting the whole activity. And sustainability, we've got to address it. I think shoestring might be a pathway to addressing things and doing stuff really quickly, which might be complementary to some of the long-term developments that support it as well. Thank you very much.